Hello world, today we are going to solve the sixth question of the college admission questions of Oxford at the year 2012. So let's start. Alice, Bob, and Charlie are well-known expert logicians. They always tell the truth. They are set in a row as illustrated above. Each of the scenarios below, their father puts a red or blue hat on each of their heads. Alice can see Bob's and Charlie's hats, but not her own. So this is going to be something like this. After that, Bob can only see Charlie's hats, and Charlie can see none of the hats. So she's just blind. And after that, all three of them are aware of this arrangement is given. So let's start. Their father puts a hat on each of their heads and says, each of your hats is either red or blue, and at least one of you has a red hat. We have to keep this on mind. Alice then says, I know the color of my hat. Let's think about this right over here. So if we have at least one red hat occurring at once, it means that if Alice is aware of her color of her hat, this leads us to a situation where we only have Bob and Charlie with two blue hats, and this is caused by at least one of them having a red hat. So if we think about other possibilities, in this situation, Alice wouldn't be able to determine her color of hat because of these two having different colors. And after that, let's think about red, red, and red. So this is also not possible because if we have at least one at least a red hat occurring once, Alice is again not able to determine her color of her hat at this situation as well. So our answer is red, blue, and blue. Let's continue with the second one. Their father puts a new hat on each of their heads and again says, each of your hats is either red or blue. At least one of you has a red hat. So it's the same again. Alice then says, I don't know the color of my hat. Let's sketch this. And after that, also Bob says, I don't know the color of my hat. So here we are got to determine the color of Charlie's hat. So for this, I'm going to just give some random colors. So Charlie, let's say that Charlie's hat is blue and Alice's hat is red, and then Bob's is red again. Let's give blue to Charlie again, blue to Bob, and red to Alice. So this is the answer of the previous question. And Alice was able to determine the color of her hat from the question stating at least one of you has a red hat. So this is not possible for this question. Let's give blue to Charlie, red to Bob, and blue to Alice. So if Alice doesn't know the color of her hat, Bob and Charlie have different colors. And let's try just one more. Red for Charlie blue for Bob, and then blue for Alice. So here we know that red hat is occurring at least once, and Bob knows that Charlie has a red hat, and he also knows that he couldn't he could not have a red hat since Alice could determine that because both Bob and Charlie has a red hat, her hat would be blue. So let's think about another one. Blue, blue, and blue. So also at this point, Bob doesn't know the color of. Bob also knows that Alice couldn't determine her color of her hat, and then he knows Charlie's hat is blue. And by the way, this is not possible. Yeah. And okay, we have evaluated this one. Okay, let's give blue for Charlie, red for Bob, and then red for Alice again. In this situation, Bob knows that Charlie's hat is blue, and therefore, because also Alice doesn't know her color of her hat, this part should be this part should be the same colors, because if Alice knew that her hat is red or blue, there should be two blues here because of her knowing the color of her hat. But if this was blue, this was red, and this is red, which is the same as this one, Alice here knows the color of her hat actually. Sorry, Bob knows the color of her hat actually because he also knows that Alice's hat's color could not be determined. So if this is blue, Bob's hat should be red, since Alice doesn't know the color of her hat. So let's give the values here. So this is a possible one, but here Bob knows the color of her hat. So, and then I think we have covered all of the possibilities with Charlie having a blue color. And then the only option left here is this one. By the way, the color of Alice's and Bob's hats could change. So what color is each person's hat is, sorry, we have had this question. What color is Charlie's hat? It is only red. Okay, let's continue. Their father puts a new hat on each of their heads and says, each of your hats is either red or blue. At least one of you has a red hat, and at least one of you has a blue hat. I'm going to sketch this over here. What color is each person's hat? So this is a quite easy one. Alice says, I know the color of my hat. And Bob says that his hat is red. So, and also we have the information that there is at least a blue hat as well. Okay, so if Alice knows the color of her hat, there should be a red hat that Charlie is having over here, because if we think about the other situations, at this point, Alice can both have blue and red colored hats. And also let's give, these are the only possibilities, because if we give red for Charlie again, it's the same. Okay, so the answer for this question is Bob having a red hat, Charlie for Charlie red again, and then Alice would be blue. What color is each person's hat? It is B, R, R. Their father puts a new hat on each of their hats and says, each of your hats is either red or blue. At least one of you has a red hat, and at least one of you has a blue hat. Alice then says, I don't know the color of my hat. And Bob then says, my hat is red. So let's write this over here. So Bob's hat is red, and Alice doesn't know the color of her hat. So the answer to the previous question gets eliminated here as well, because if the color of Alice's hat were blue, these two would be red, since we should having a blue colored hat on at least once. So think about the other possibilities. Here we have Bob with a red colored hat and Charlie with a blue colored hat. And since Alice doesn't know this should be blue or red. But the only thing is, because Bob has a red hat, Charlie is supposed to have a blue hat. Yeah, this is required uh, for this specific situation, because there is no other possibilities left for Alice's hat's color. It should be always blue if Charlie gets a colored hat of red. So what color is Charlie's hat? It should be blue. I'm going to clear this part for the last question. Their father puts a new hat on each of their hats and says, each of your hats is either red or blue. Two of you who are seated adjacently both have red hats. Alice then says, I don't know the color of my hat. What color is Charlie's hat? Explain your answer. Okay, this seems to be a bit more complicated, but actually it's not. If we think about this part, two of you who are seated adjacently both have red hats. We have the following possible configurations. I thought about these two combining at the last one, because if these both occur, it would be valid for two of them who are seated adjacently, both having red hats. And let's think about this. And by the way, I have to put Alice, Bob, and Charlie here. I don't know the color of my hat, Alice says. Okay. So in this type of situation, if Charlie has a hat colored of blue, Alice and Bob would be able to determine their hats colors. And if we think about the other ones, since Alice doesn't know the color of her hat, we are given that uh, Charlie's, we are given that two of them are adjacent, two of them who are seated adjacently have red hats. And starting from that point, what color is Charlie's hat is being asked. And then if Charlie's hat is red and Bob's hat is red again, how could Alice determine the color of her hat? But if we think about this part, Alice, Bob, and Charlie, Alice and Bob having two red colored hats, and Charlie is only left with a blue color, which is valid. But here, if Bob and Charlie has both red hats, Alice wouldn't be able to determine the color of her hat. So the answer is Charlie should have a red hat.